I mean, and the truth is, he's better looking than Matthew McConaughey anyway.
All right. I've been doing a little homework.
I love it. You come prepared.
We'll see. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing? What kinds of...
I'm doing very well. We just started yesterday, Larry Michael, you're in the audience someplace, Larry, that we just started the Riggo the Diesel, I think is the name of it, podcast on the Redskin website. So we got our first show in. I think they'll only get better. Larry thought it was great. I kind of know.
No, I listened to that.
I've done a little more in it.
I listened to it and I thought, man, it sounds like you've been doing it for years. And I'm serious.
Well, good then.
Right? How did that feel? What'd you think about it?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of still, I love to entertain, obviously, and I know Matthew McConaughey, he's a great actor. Not many people know how great an actor I am. I mean, who can forget the sterling performance of Bud Blackwell out at the Albany Theater in Illegal Motion, And then, of course, there was Mitch Hendon on Guiding Light years ago, who was a CIA agent that caught his wife cheating on him. He had to kill her, and, of course, he leapt to his death. Didn't leave me much wiggle room to get back on the Guiding Light, but
that,
such is life.
That does spark a question. I mean, what was it like to be on a soap opera?
Let's face it, there's not a lot of rehearsal time, and I would have needed a lot more to actually get anywhere I needed to go with this role. But it was a lot of fun, actually, because I was living in New York at the time, and I lived on 39th and 9th, and this was over on 44th Street, I believe, and it was just right over by the Chrysler Building. So it was just I'd hop on the subway, go across town, get off there at Grand Central Station, walk to work. It was great. I enjoyed it.
All in a day's work.
Yeah,
Reba, she was my favorite on that soap opera. Remember her?
Yeah, and
Reba?
one of the ladies there she was from someplace right here in Maryland. I can't remember her name, but because the soap operas have departed. So
a little bit, yes. So speaking of soap operas, no drama here because the season has not started yet, right? So
that's always a good thing.
That is always a good thing. What does this event? What kind of memories does this bring back for you in terms of getting ready to get the season underway?
It's funny you should ask that, Lindsay, but I remember my first welcome home luncheon, I believe, was at the Omni Shoreham, if I'm not mistaken. It was a hotel overnight, but I think it was the Omni Shoreham. And, of course, Walter Washington was the mayor at that time. Now, some of you folks that don't know your D.C. history, because you're a little bit on the younger side, that would have been back in 1976. So we're going back quite a few years here. But I was new in town. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what kind of a ride this was going to be. I went through some changes, with coaching changes from Coach Allen to Coach Pardee, and then eventually with Coach Gibbs. And, it turned out to be a pretty good thing.
What is your favorite memory, the one that you think about the most from your playing days?
Well, the ones that we can talk about. Actually,
well, we can talk about all of them. I mean, that's much more interesting.
That wouldn't be good for me. That wouldn't be good for me. It's actually, you have to appreciate that when I got into the league in 1971 with the Jets, the 6th pick overall in the draft, that I really kind of figured with the way things were. I always knew I was getting into something that I didn't have the chops for. Because I remember the people in the little town I grew up in Centralia, a town of 500 people, and there was, when you get in little towns like that, people don't want you to get too high. They don't want you to get too low either. We all just want to kind of stay here in the same level. So there was maybe, they was thinking, well, wait till he gets down there with the big boys. That was the University of Kansas, and as we all know, the Jayhawks have one of the greatest football traditions in the entire country. I don't think they won a game last year. But anyway, when I got down to KU, I figured, and I remember after my first day of practice, I said, this is nuts. I can't play at this level. They were right. I'm a fraud, and I didn't have a problem with it. I was afraid my dad was going to have a bigger problem than me. So when I get drafted by the Jets, I go up there, and I thought the same thing. Well, finally, I'm going to get to the level where I will be discovered once again. And that never happened.
Why didn't you have confidence? Because you knew what you could do.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I didn't really know what the NFL was all about in that level of play. And just like I had to learn it in college, I thought that, like I said, at the first day of practice at KU, I went, nah, this is too tough. But it was an extremely difficult practice, one that we wouldn't repeat the following day. But the reason they did it, I look back on it now, was to weed out guys like me. So, the guys that were going to just kind of half-step everything. I thought, yeah, that's the way I've been doing things through my high school career. But anyway, I had to have readjust my attitude somewhat. But when I got to the Jets, like I said, I didn't think that it was going to turn out for me. But I did if I would have made it. I had this one little ambition, if you want to call it that. My one goal was to play in a Super Bowl. That to me was good enough. So, fast forward to 1983, RFK Stadium, Dallas Cowboys, Washington Redskins, championship game. Whoever wins this game goes to Pasadena, and I'm very pleased to say that we won that game. We went to Pasadena, and even though winning the Super Bowl was a big highlight, and being the MVP, another big highlight, it all started with that game against the Cowboys, because let's face it, the Dallas Cowboys, you had them at home in the championship game, and it turned out for us to be the way it was supposed to be. So that was, my wish had been granted at that point.
Take us there. What do you remember from that moment?
Oh, well, everybody that was at that game remembers the beginning of it, as they would have the end of the Minnesota game the week before, which basically looked like, for a moment, if you wanted to suspend your reality, that perhaps an earthquake had hit RFK Stadium, because they had those bleachers around. And I'm telling you, there were some people going up and down on those things. And that, to me, and then just the roar of the crowd. And I mean, I guess I am pretty much a ham, because that's what I played for. I played for the fans, really. I mean, they talk about guys that love the game, and I ain't got nothing against the guys that love the game, but getting beat up every Sunday afternoon ain't my idea of fun. But it's all worthwhile when you hear those fans cheering for you.
What was it like for you going home from a game? What was your routine?
Well, there was always a stop at some gin mill, I'm pretty sure. I had to get more diesel fuel. My tank was running a little low. And then you got home, went to bed, and you got up, and it was never on Monday, very rarely on a Monday. You still, maybe there is some comparisons here, but my engine got warm enough on Sunday afternoons that it still hadn't cooled off completely by Monday, and even through practice. Tuesday was a whole other ball game. That was our day off, which usually I spent part of the day out at the park, getting some kind of treatment, because that's when you'd really, the stiffness 48 hours later always seemed that's when I got particularly, could feel the bumps and the bruises of the game.
You mentioned the fans. The fans do have a lot to be excited about at this point right now as we get ready to go into this season. One of those things, one of the list of many, I would say, is Adrian Peterson joining the Washington Redskins. So he's 33.
You confirmed that?
I confirmed it, yes.
Okay.
I'm correct, yes?
I guess they call
Oh, he's
him
right there.
Pop.
I'm sorry, I saw you over there. Yeah, you're 33. Yes, 33. You had some of your best seasons at 34 and 35. How did you do it?
Well, I wished I had an answer for you, Lindsey. I mean, I kid around and stuff like that, but I had as much talent for a running back as anybody's played this game, and I say that in all humility. And that talent served me well later in my life. Part of it was I got lucky. And the luck part of it was a guy by the name of Joe Gibbs, and maybe even to a certain extent, even luckier still, was a guy by the name of Joe Bugle. Because you had a team that was in flux, really, because when Coach Gibbs got here, Air Coryell, he wanted to throw the football. And we struggled, as everybody can recall. We lost the first 5 games. And then in that 6th game against the Chicago Bears, I must have been Joe Bugle told Joe, we got to run the ball. And I think I had a 100-yard game in that Chicago game. We win that first game, and all of a sudden, I think that Joe Gibbs understood, the first basic premise in biology is that the organism that adapts survives. He adapted, and from then on, but you got to keep in mind that Joe Washington was the #1 back at that time. So we played out that season. Little Joe got hurt in the preseason of 1982. And so then I became the #1, the running back. We play 2 games. You have the strike, and then we come back and we play, and just everything morphed into that championship run.
So what was that like?
Boy, I'll tell you what. Somebody asked me yesterday. Well, I think it was Larry asked me yesterday about Alex Ovechkin and the way he celebrated after they won the Caps had won the Stanley Cup. And he asked me, he said something about to celebrate, and I told him, I'm still celebrating. That's what that's like. So maybe we'll have something a little more current this year.
What are you most excited about when you look at this team that you've got getting ready?
I'll tell you, I think, and I don't want to take anything with the guys that wear white jerseys on during the week, but I got to believe the defense to me looks like a unit, because I'm going to be honest with you folks. I know a little bit about football, but I slept through most of those meetings. And keep in mind, and I think, AP, you would tell them this, Larry, you're out there, Larry Brown, and all the rest of the running backs. They give you the ball, you're on your own. I don't care what they tell you during the week, and they draw up the play. It ain't like that, folks. It's chaos and mayhem in the backfield. So why wouldn't I sleep during the meetings? I was tired. I need to refreshen myself for practice.
You need all the help you can get.
Yes, exactly. I thought work smarter, not harder. So really, and I remember telling this to Norv Turner while he was here, that during the time when Joe Gibbs came in, and you got to appreciate that Joe had so many formations, and out of those formations, he had so many people moving. Let's face it, I only got handed the ball. I was never thrown the ball. So for me to know all that stuff, I never knew. I knew whether it was a right formation, left formation. I knew it was a running play. If it wasn't, I knew my pass blocking assignments. But that was about it. So, AP, I'm giving you some bad advice. I can tell you that right now. Do not
join us up here and clarify anything, or no? We're good.
Do not take any advice from me. I was always looking. Jack Pardee once famously said, "There is no Northwest Passage in the NFL." I said, "The hell there ain't, and I'm going to find it."
When you watch Peterson run, how do you think? How do you see it? Similar or different from your style?
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, everybody watched the game Friday night. I see a guy that looked like he just got into the league. Now, the big question is, and this is where the age factor comes in, but I also believe that there's a little bit of age discrimination that goes on in the NFL by coaches, because they just figure it hasn't been done, or it's been done so infrequently. Okay, so what makes you think that this guy's still got it? But I think that he still has it. I thought I saw everything. The big question is, can you do it 25 times a game for 16 games? And that's all that remains to be seen.
Can you do it 25 times a game? Of course. Of
Of course. That was a thumbs up.
One last thing I want to ask you about on the podcast, which is, by the way, very good, and I'm not just plugging it because Larry Michael told me to. I am saying, I'm just kidding, Larry. When you mentioned you telling Coach Joe Gibbs that you would make him famous, can you clarify that?
I would love to. Thank you for reminding me.
So Joe Gibbs tells the story about how you leaned over and said...
I don't have quite the same memory of that event. I was out in Kansas. I didn't play in 1980, as some of you folks will remember. I went back to school, and I finally got through Econ 10. I think it was my third or fourth attempt. I got a B, actually. I was pretty pleased. Of course, it was the only class I was taking. But in the spring of 1981, there's an announcement. Actually, I think it was more in February, but I can't remember exactly, that Washington had hired Joe Gibbs as the next head coach. And now, if everybody out there is honest with themselves, you've never heard of Joe. I hadn't heard of Joe. I think he was the offensive coordinator for the San Diego Chargers. So all of a sudden, one afternoon, and I think this was probably in late to middle April or early May, I get a phone call. I was over having a few beers with some of my friends that Joe Gibbs was in town. And I thought, well, okay. I said, but I'm over here. He didn't call and tell me he was coming. I said, I'll see him tomorrow morning for breakfast. I have no idea if Joe was planning on flying back that night, but I got a call, make an appointment with me. I'm sorry. So I show up there. He drives up to the back of the house there, and I met him at the back door, and I had a Budweiser in each hand. Handed one to Joe, and Joe just kind of, you know how he is, he kind of, I don't drink. And I went, that's okay, Joe, I'll drink yours. And I did. I had my 2 beers, we get done, so we're heading out. And Joe says that I told him, and of course in his mind is racing, because I know when I showed up with the 2 beers, that's when he started the post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think he had that the entire time until he got back here and saw friendly faces. Because I don't think he heard a word I was saying, at breakfast, not that there was anything necessarily that you needed to hear. But he got out there, and what I'm pretty sure I told Joe was that you're going to be a great coach with or without John Riggins. And damned if I wasn't right. He turned out to be pretty good with me and pretty good without me. But I don't recall me telling him he had to get me back and I would make him famous. And when it's all said and done, he made me more famous than I made him. So I owe him a debt of gratitude.
Well, and maybe he embellishes for effect, but it's a pretty good story.
Right? I like his version better than mine.
And by the way, I know we spent a lot of time talking about Adrian, but also very exciting additions, Alex Smith, and all of you that are new to the team this year. We really look forward to it. And thank all of you for being here at this Redskins Welcome Home luncheon. This has been a tremendous afternoon. A lot of money raised to do a lot of good work. If you would please remain seated as the players exit back here, backstage. And thank you again. We'll see you next year. And good luck this season. We can't wait to watch. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
I think you were better than Matthew.
Oh, sure.
Let the point soar. Fight on, till you have won. Sons of